G'day guys, Chronicles of Solid here and welcome back to the garage. I hope you're all doing well, and today I wanted to do a review on my Iron 1200 from Harley Davidson, so let's get into it. Before we jump on the bike for a test ride, I'll quickly go through specifications for those coming across the Iron 1200 for the first time. This is a 2019 model. It's in Twisted Cherry, which I absolutely love. That color looks spectacular in my opinion. It's the best of any of the colors they've offered so far. Now, this Harley Sportster Iron 1200 obviously has the 1200cc V-twin. It's mated to a 5-speed manual gearbox. It's belt driven, which is nice. You don't have to worry about chain maintenance. And the peanut tank that you can see there holds 12.5 litres of fuel. I get roughly 140, 150 kilometers before the fuel light comes on. So this really isn't built for touring, but you can get from petrol station to petrol station on a longer ride without too much trouble. The wet weight of this motorcycle is 256 kilos. It makes roughly 97 newton meters of torque. Harley haven't given horsepower figures, but I believe it's somewhere around the 65 to 67 horsepower figure. That's not a lot, but it's enough to get the job done, especially with all those oodles of torque. You have plenty of go to keep ahead of traffic. Now, I wanted to point out that seat. Harley usually suck at making seats, but that one is particularly fantastic. Anyway, it's about time to get on the road, so let's get going. Now, you're probably wondering, why is a cruiser rider wearing an MX helmet? Well, it's my only helmet that I have with a camera mount, so you have to bear with me with the odd looks. Also, I might do a bit of voiceover work with this video purely because this helmet tends to be quite noisy in the wind. So let's get out on the road and see how this bike handles. I'm going to split this review up into the good and the bad and how those relate to my purchase decision and my needs moving forward as a motorcycle rider. I'm also a big believer in the idea that bikes aren't inherently bad, at least relatively speaking. It's usually a poor choice by the purchaser that they've bought a bike that doesn't really suit their needs. And this is what's happened with me and my Harley. When I bought it, it was a perfect bike for what I needed, but my circumstances have since changed and this bike no longer makes sense to me. And I wanted to go through those changes in my mindset throughout the video. So what do I love about this motorcycle? Well, for one thing, I love the motor. It's fantastic. The V-twin air-cooled pushrod motor sound is just beautiful to my ears. That's very subjective, but I love the sound of a air-cooled Harley. The other thing is the looks. To me personally, I absolutely love the looks of that twisted cherry red color with the blacked out engine. It looks fantastic to me, and that was a major factor in my purchasing choice. The reason I got a Harley was because I was working a full-time job that was very stressful. It left me with not much time. I wasn't very fit. If you've got family obligations on top of that, you soon run out of time. So I needed a bike that I could use just for a short half hour, maybe an hour ride with my mates to squeeze into an already packed weekend. So this bike makes perfect sense if you're wanting to commute during the week to put a smile on your face between your 9 to 5 job, and for the odd little sneaky run to the pub or to the coffee shop during the weekend. So for those things, this bike is fantastic. Ergonomics on this bike are really great. I'm roughly 6 foot tall, so I fit perfectly on the Iron 1200 with its mini apes and its mid controls. So that was another plus. I sat on this and felt quite comfortable. The 883 was a bit cramped with its lower bars, and I didn't like the 48 Special with its forward controls. So the Iron 1200 ergonomically, that was another positive plus in my book. Another positive is the 1200cc motor in the Iron 1200. It's a bit more peppy than the 883 Sportster. It's also got a bit more grunt for getting around trucks like this situation, and it tends to have longer legs in the gearing. The 1200 has a higher gearing so it has a little more go at higher speeds I found than the 883, so that's another positive. Fantastic view. So as I said, she's got the stock pipes on her, so she's not too loud. I did have a set of Vance & Hines twin slash slip-ons. Long story short is I didn't like them too loud, even with the quiet baffles in. Maneuverability and centre of gravity are another two pluses on this motorcycle. It's very easy to do U-turns and slow speed manoeuvring. It's very confidence inspiring. I've ridden the 48 Special as well, and I can say the same of that bike. Although the wider tyres do make it a little more cumbersome in tight situations, but those wider tyres on the 48 make it better at being stable on the open highway. But the Iron 1200 is definitely the best of those two bikes in city situations where manoeuvrability is king. Now, one of the pluses of this bike is also a negative. That low stance, that slammed look comes at a price. The suspension travel is very short, and I also think Harley have saved a bit of money with putting not so great suspension on this bike. So cobblestones like this, or on the open road where the roads tend to be a bit more crap here in Australia, you really do feel the jarring. While I'm here, I might just quickly go through the dash display. You can see neutral, the oil light's on just because I haven't started it, and all the other lights, ABS light there. It's pretty simple. You got your speedo, and then in here you can have your revs. Switch it with this little button here. You can see how many Ks I've done. Obviously I haven't been able to ride this bike much. And you got trip A, trip B, time, and then your gear indicator again. That simple. You might have noticed there that the Iron 1200 doesn't have a fuel gauge. That's true of all the Sportsters. You can get an aftermarket fuel gauge to sit on the brake reservoir to the right on the handlebar there. But I just use my trip meter. I'm more than happy to do that. It doesn't bother me. I've never needed a fuel gauge. I'm used to having bikes with a trip meter, so it's not an issue. Another positive are the Mini Ape handlebars. You can see splitting through traffic here, my bars are higher than most car rear view mirrors. I do have some trouble with the SUVs there, but it's quite a nimble bike, and those Mini Apes make it great for splitting traffic. So that's another positive, and another reason I think this is a fantastic city bike is just its ease of splitting through traffic and getting to the front, which you do need to kind of have with a motorcycle that has air cooling. Now, the lean angle of this bike was a concern when I bought it. I didn't notice it so much when I first test rode it and the 48 Special, and even in the first month or so of owning it. But as I got more confident with leaning the bike over, I've since started scraping the pegs fairly regularly. That's mainly because I'm used to bikes with more clearance, and I like leaning into the corners. The lean angle certainly doesn't stop you from enjoying the corners, but it does stop you from getting very spirited in the corners. You'll undo yourself pretty quickly if you're expecting to lean right in. But in saying that, if you're getting the cruiser just to cruise and pot around, then this bike's going to be fine. But keep that in mind, the lean angle is quite restrictive on the Sporty. The Iron 1200 has mid controls as opposed to the 48 Special's forward controls. I prefer the mids. Like I said, I'm not super tall, I'm bang on 6 feet tall, so I'm not too cramped. My knee does bang the air filter though, so long distances it might become a bit of a problem, but it's definitely preferable over forward controls to me. I just feel like I'm a parachute when my legs are out in front of me, and I always start getting leg cramps, so I prefer mid controls. Another thing to be aware of is situations like this where you're no longer moving under the power of the motorcycle's engine. This is where the weight of the Harley makes itself apparent. Here we're on a slight incline, so you have to put a bit of effort in with your legs to get the bike into the parking spot. So just be aware when you're maneuvering it about and it's not moving under the power of its own engine, it can be a bit problematic. Engine heat is another question I get asked about the Harley. Being an air-cooled motor, it does get hot when stationary. As long as you're moving, it's okay. Today in this video it was only 30 degrees, so it's a fairly mild summer's day, but yesterday it was 40 degrees. You really do start to feel the engine getting quite hot. That's why I split a lot on any of my bikes, just to keep the bikes moving, to keep the air flowing. It's particularly important, I think, for the Harley, because I do notice it when I get to a set of lights and I'm sitting there cooking my legs. Now, it's not unbearable, but it definitely is something that I would be concerned about in extreme heat. Now, as we move on to the freeway here, there's a good example of how fast the Harley can go under acceleration. It's pretty nippy when you're banging out all the gears. You can see I have to take it gingerly because of the pegs, of course. But once I start banging through the gears here, it gets moving. Our speed limit here is 100 kilometers on the freeways and 110 on the open highway. So there's not much cause for speeds higher than that. In saying that, the Harley isn't that great at the higher speed stuff, at least the Sportster 1200. That little fairing, it actually does make a difference. Compared to the 48 Special, it does feel like the air is hitting more at the top of my chest rather than on my stomach. On the 48 Special, I felt like a human parachute. As the little screen, I feel like it does protect you until the winds get to about 30 kilometers an hour. Now, the winds are very high today, and that little screen is doing nothing. You can see I'm getting battered around. On top of that, the engine vibes for some reason at 100 kilometers an hour. The bars just vibrate very, very badly, which really is quite frustrating. And also the leg position. Even though it's mid-controls, they're still quite feet forward, and I find myself having to hold my legs in because the wind's just wanting to blow them and spread them apart, I guess, which causes my muscles to be quite sore at the end of the ride. So all those things factored in make for a bike that isn't particularly suited to the open road. So this bike does lack some versatility, and I'll go into that at the very end of the video, but that was one of the major factors in me deciding to move on from this motorcycle, was just its lack of versatility. So on the open road, the Harley Iron 1200 gets the thumbs down from me. It's really not what it's designed to do. I haven't touched on the quality of the brakes yet. You can hear there I've got the famous squeal from the rear brake of the Iron 1200. It's a common thing for Sportsters apparently. Now the brakes, they have ABS, there's no other electronic features. The brakes are adequate, they're not fantastic, but they do the job. The indicators on the Harley are another thing that take a little bit to get used to. They have an indicator on each side of the handlebar, so left for left, right for right, and they're also self-cancelling, which is nice. But I do find it a little bit awkward under acceleration and turning right. Trying to accelerate, indicate at the same time can get a little bit irritating. I wanted to summarise my thoughts on the bike quickly before we go into the garage and I give you a debrief on what's next. So I think this bike is for the city dweller, someone who's looking for a great looking motorcycle that sounds fantastic, really grabs attention, and you're just wanting to have a blast with your mate, and you're not doing too many big miles. You're only maybe riding an hour, a couple of hours at the most, and not much of it at high speed. I think the bike is perfect for that scenario. Anything else and you start stretching what this bike is capable of, yes, there is a massive accessory market, so you can chop and change everything and really make this bike your own if you wanted to. But then you got to ask yourself the question, if you're forking out all that money for accessories, should you have just bought a Softail instead, or maybe some other motorcycle that suited your needs more appropriately? So before I wrap this video up, I wanted to talk about the future of the Harley in my garage. Now, for those of you who don't regularly follow me, I've recently resigned from a job. I had planned on getting another motorcycle, a dual sport, because I love off-road riding, and this was meant to complement the off-road bike. I bought the Harley first, and then I had planned on getting a off-road motorcycle. Now, since resigning, those plans have changed. I'm going to be selling the Harley. Now you might ask, why am I selling such a fantastic looking motorcycle? It's purely because the Harley is very limited in what it can do. It's really a cruiser, you know, the name is evident in on itself. It's great for going down to the cafe or a short blast down to the beach with your mates, but it's very limited in what it can do outside for me as a rider. It might be different for other people, but for me, I really don't enjoy riding this bike long distances, especially on rough terrain. So really it's just a nice city bike, and I can't justify that in the garage as well as a dual sport. Now, talking about dual sports, for the regular viewers, I am going to be putting up a poll. I'll probably chuck it up next week, and I'm going to list all the bikes I'm thinking of getting, and I'd really like to see your opinions. You can vote on which bike you think is best. I will even put in an option, well, at least I'll try and put in an option for other where you can name bikes that I haven't thought of, because I'm really interested in what you guys think. Maybe you'll even come up with a bike I haven't considered, so look for that in the coming week. And as always, I've been Chronicles of Solid. Thanks for watching the video. I'll catch you later.